The call came at 2:47 in the morning, and Vivian Cho almost didn't answer it. She was sitting in the parking garage of St. Albans Regional Medical Center, still in her scrubs, her left hand pressed flat against her sternum like she could physically slow her own heartbeat. 12 hours. She had just worked 12 hours without sitting down once, without eating, without anything except the kind of focus that burns through you like a fever and leaves you hollow on the other side. Her stethoscope was still around her neck. She hadn't even gotten that far. The phone buzzed against the center console, unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail. She picked up. "Is this Vivian Cho? Staff RN, third floor trauma unit?" "Yes," she said slowly. There was a pause. A short one, but she noticed it. "This is Detective Harlan Briggs, Millbrook PD. We need you to come in tonight." She didn't sleep that night. She didn't sleep for a long time after that. Vivian had been a nurse for 6 years. She had served 2 years before that as a medic in the Army Reserve, deployed once to a forward operating base in Eastern Europe where she learned that the human body could take more punishment than anyone told you in school, and that the people who held it together during that punishment were the ones who didn't ask permission to be strong. She came home with a commendation, a knee that ached in cold weather, and a quiet certainty about who she was and what she was for. She was 31 years old. She lived alone in a 2-bedroom apartment on Clearfield Street, 20 minutes from the hospital. She had a cat named Rowan, a collection of succulents she was slowly killing by overwatering, and a habit of making soup from scratch on Sunday mornings because her grandmother had done the same thing, and some rituals are not about efficiency. She was not the kind of person things happened to. She had always believed that. She was wrong. The night it started, the real night, not the phone call, began 3 weeks earlier on a Tuesday in late October. Vivian had just finished a double shift covering for a colleague out sick. She was driving home on Route 9 at midnight, windows down despite the cold, because she needed the air to stay awake. She was doing 42 in a 40 zone. Not reckless, not careful enough, apparently. The lights came on behind her immediately. She pulled over without thinking. She'd been pulled over once before, years ago, a busted taillight. She knew the protocol. Hands on the wheel, be polite, get it done, go home. She was tired. She just wanted to go home. The officer took his time getting out of the car. When he finally appeared at her window, he was tall, mid-40s, with the kind of face that had probably been handsome once and had since settled into something harder. His name tag read Sutter, license registration. She handed them over. She had already pulled them out. He looked at her license for a long moment, then at her, then at her scrubs. "You been drinking tonight?" "No," she said. "I just got off a shift at St. Albans. I'm a nurse." He didn't acknowledge that. "Step out of the vehicle." She blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." She got out. The wind cut through her scrubs immediately, and she hugged her arms across her chest. Her left knee, the one that had been reconstructed after a training injury in her 2nd year of service, throbbed with the cold. She had a parking placard for it. She had documentation. She kept both in her glove compartment like armor she hoped she'd never need. "Walk to the front of your vehicle," Sutter said. "Officer, I have a knee injury. I have documentation." Walk to the front of the vehicle. She walked. It hurt. She made it without limping because she had learned to do that, learned to absorb the pain and keep moving, but each step pulled at something deep in the joint, and she pressed her teeth together, and she made it to the front of the car. "Turn around." "Hands on the hood." "I haven't done anything," Vivian said. Her voice was very calm. She was very good at calm. "Hands on the hood." She put her hands on the hood. "We received a report of erratic driving on Route 9 tonight. Description matched your vehicle. I've been driving in a straight line at 42 miles an hour. How do you know how fast you were going?" "Because I was watching my speedometer." He walked a slow circle around her. She was aware of the dashcam mounted behind his windshield. She was aware of the body camera clipped to his chest. She was aware of all of it, and she held very still. "I'm going to search your vehicle." She turned around. "You don't have consent for that," she said, "and unless you have probable cause. I just told you we have a report of erratic driving. An anonymous report and a vehicle description is not probable cause to search my car. I know my rights." Something shifted in his face. Something that wasn't anger exactly, but was something adjacent to it. the particular expression of a person who has decided that being questioned is the same as being challenged. "You're being uncooperative," he said. "I'm citing the Fourth Amendment," she said. He cuffed her, not roughly. He was careful about it, technically. But he cuffed her, guided her to the back of his patrol car, and while she sat in the back, in the cold with her hands behind her, he searched her vehicle anyway. He found nothing. Of course he found nothing. He searched the center console, the glove compartment, under the seats, the trunk. He was thorough. It took 22 minutes. When he came back, he told her he was citing her for failure to comply with a lawful order. He did not cite her for speeding. He let her go, finally, just before 2 in the morning. She drove home in silence. She did not cry until she was inside, with the door locked and Rowan on her lap, and even then it was only for a few minutes, because crying felt like conceding something she wasn't ready to give. She didn't file a complaint the next day. She told herself it was because she was tired. She told herself it was because she didn't want the trouble. She told herself a lot of things that week, and most of them were versions of the same quiet lie. That it had been a misunderstanding, that it would be fine, that nothing would come of it. Then Detective Briggs called. The Millbrook PD was a squat brick building on Connolly Avenue with a waiting room that smelled like bad coffee and industrial cleaner. Vivian arrived at 8 in the morning because that was when Briggs had told her to come. She had brought nothing except her ID and her phone, and she had texted her friend Steph, the charge nurse who had known her since nursing school, the address of the building and the words, "If you don't hear from me by noon, call someone." Briggs was not what she expected. He was 50s, heavy through the shoulders, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He shook her hand and offered her coffee, and for about 4 minutes managed to make the whole thing feel almost administrative. Then he slid a form across the table. "Officer Sutter filed a use-of-force report following your interaction on Route 9, he said. "He's alleging that you resisted arrest and struck him during the cuffing procedure." Vivian looked at the form. Then she looked at Briggs. "I did not touch him," she said. "He says you pulled your arm away and made contact with his forearm." He grabbed my wrist and I flinched. I was startled. I was not being violent. Briggs wrote something down. "Do you understand that resisting arrest is a charge that could?" "I understand exactly what it is," she said. "I also understand that Officer Sutter searched my vehicle without consent or probable cause, cuffed me without stating a charge, and cited me for a violation that doesn't exist in statute. I'd like that noted. That's a separate matter." "Is it?" Another pause. The second one she'd noticed from someone in this building. "Mrs. Cho," Briggs said carefully, "I'd encourage you to let us conduct our review, and I'd like to know whether I'm a suspect or a witness." He didn't answer right away. That was its own answer. She drove home and called a lawyer. The lawyer's name was Yvonne Park, and she had spent 12 years doing civil rights work in the state before going into private practice, and she listened to the whole story without interrupting once, which Vivian found remarkable. When it was over, Yvonne was quiet for a moment. "Did you see whether the body cam was on?" "The light was on." "Yes. And the dash cam?" "Active when he pulled me over. I don't know if it stayed on." "Okay," Yvonne said. "Here's what we're dealing with. Sutter filed the use-of-force report before you could file a complaint, which is a classic preemptive move. It puts you on the defensive. It makes you the person with something to answer for." She paused. "Do you have any documentation of your knee injury? Military medical records? Anything?" "I have everything," Vivian said. "I have the surgical report, the VA records, the parking placard form, everything. Good. We're going to need it." "Am I in actual trouble?" Yvonne took a breath. "You could be. The charge of resisting is thin, but it's not impossible. It depends on the footage. Then get the footage. We're going to try." What Yvonne didn't say, and what Vivian already knew, was that getting footage from a police department in an internal affairs situation could take weeks, could require litigation, could get lost in appeals and procedural delays until it became something you were still fighting 18 months later in a hearing room with fluorescent lights and a court reporter who had stopped making eye contact. She had heard enough stories. She worked with enough nurses who had gone through enough things to know how these machines ran. She sent Steph a voice message that night. Steph called back in under 3 minutes. "Tell me everything," Steph said. She did. "Okay," Steph said when she was done. "Okay, who else was there that night on Route 9? Just Sutter. And nobody stopped? No other cars? One car slowed down, Vivian said slowly. A black pickup. It pulled over maybe 100 feet ahead of me. I assumed they were just waiting to pass. Did you see anyone get out? She thought about it. The cold, the headlights. Her hands on the hood of her car. No, she said, but the truck was there the whole time. Didn't leave until after I did. 6 days later, Yvonne received a call from a sergeant named Rocha. Rocha was not IA. He was not assigned to Sutter's precinct. He was a 20-year veteran of the department who had been on Route 9 that night, not on duty but on his way home from his sister's house in Fairfield, and he had pulled over when he saw the stop because something about the way it was unfolding made the back of his neck go tight in the particular way that 20 years of policing teaches you. He had stayed. He had watched. He had said nothing because he wasn't there officially, and because he had made the calculation that most people make when they see something uncomfortable. He told himself it wasn't his business. But then he had heard about the use of force report. He had a friend in records. And something about the report, some specific detail about the alleged contact, didn't match what he had seen from that truck on Route 9. He called Yvonne because he found her name in the system after doing a search on Vivian's case number. He asked to speak to the nurse. Yvonne said she'd ask. Vivian called him back from her apartment on a Thursday evening, standing at her kitchen window, watching the street below because she couldn't make herself sit still. I was there, Rocha said without preamble. I saw what happened. Sutter's report, the part about the contact, it's not what I saw. What did you see? Her voice was very steady. I saw a woman comply with every instruction she was given while clearly in pain. I saw a search conducted without cause, and I did not see any strike or aggression from her at any point. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Why are you telling me this now? Another pause. Because I have a daughter, he said. She's 29. She just finished her residency. She's going to be a doctor. And I keep thinking about what I'd want someone to do if it were her standing out there in the cold. She didn't say anything. She didn't trust herself to. I've already told Yvonne I'll give a statement, Rocha said. I wanted you to hear it from me first. The body cam footage came through Yvonne's FOIA request 11 days later. There were 47 seconds missing from the recording, a gap that began at exactly the moment Vivian had first stated her rights and ended after the cuffing was complete. The department said it was a technical error. Yvonne said they would let the court decide that. The dashcam footage was intact. It showed Vivian's car traveling in a straight line at a consistent speed. It showed her step out of the vehicle and walk, carefully, with a slight hitch in her left leg that anyone watching for it would notice. It showed her comply with every instruction. It showed Sutter move to cuff her 7 seconds after she had cited the Fourth Amendment. Yvonne filed the civil rights complaint on a Monday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, it had been picked up by a local reporter named Gail Morrow who covered the justice beat for the Millbrook Register. By Thursday, Gail's piece had been shared 40,000 times, partly because she had obtained and published the dashcam footage, and partly because Gail was a very good writer who understood that the most powerful stories were not about monsters but about systems, the ordinary mechanisms by which something reasonable sounding becomes something unconscionable. Vivian did not read the comments. She found this was the wisest decision she had ever made. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. In that 6 weeks, Vivian worked every shift she was scheduled, covered 2 extra shifts for colleagues, and did not speak publicly about the case except once in a parking lot outside a coffee shop to Gail Morrow on the record for exactly 20 minutes. She said, I am a nurse and a veteran, and I was treated as a suspect for citing my constitutional rights. I do not think I am unique. I think I am just one of the people who happen to have a witness and a lawyer. She said, I am not angry at every police officer. I am angry at a specific set of choices made by a specific person in a position of authority, and I am angry at the system that made it easier for him to file a report against me than for me to file a complaint against him. She said, I hope something changes. I do not know if it will, but I hope. Gail published the interview verbatim. Vivian thought that was the right call. The night before the hearing, she couldn't sleep. She sat in her kitchen with Rowan in her lap and a cup of tea she had made and forgotten to drink, and she thought about the night on Route 9, about the cold and the pavement under her boots and the particular humiliation of standing with your hands on the hood of your own car while someone goes through your things looking for a reason to be right about you. She thought about the truck on the shoulder, 100 feet ahead. She thought about a man making a calculation about whether something was his business. She thought about how differently it might have ended. The hearing room was standing room only. She hadn't expected that. Yvonne had warned her that there might be some press, maybe a few people from the advocacy groups that had contacted them after the register piece. What she had not expected was the back 2 rows, filled with nurses from St. Albans in their scrubs, many of them still in their badge holders from shift. She had not expected the woman near the aisle who was holding a handwritten sign that read "Nurses Serve." So do veterans. So do both. She had not expected when she walked in for some clapping and for the room to follow. She sat down and pressed her hands flat on the table in front of her and breathed. Yvonne was composed and surgical. She presented the dashcam footage in full. She presented Rocha's signed statement. She presented Vivian's military records and VA documentation of the knee injury, documentation that demonstrated, clearly and without ambiguity, that Vivian's careful movement during the traffic stop was not the behavior of someone being evasive or aggressive, but of someone managing a documented physical disability. She presented the 47-second gap in the body cam footage and asked the board to consider what kind of technical error affects only the specific 47 seconds in which the most disputed actions of the stop took place. The board asked Sutter questions for 40 minutes. He answered with the kind of precision that suggested he had prepared extensively, but preparation and truth are not always the same thing, and there are questions you cannot fully prepare for, the ones that ask you to account for what the camera saw versus what your report says. Rocha testified for 12 minutes. He was brief and specific, and he did not editorialize. He said what he had seen. He said it plainly. He said it twice when asked to repeat himself, and his voice was exactly the same both times. Vivian took the stand last. She wore her dress uniform, the Army service uniform she had not put on in 3 years, pressed the night before while Rowan watched from the couch. She had debated it. She had thought it might seem calculated, performative. She had put it on anyway, because it was true. It was who she was. She was not going to hide the parts of herself that were inconvenient for someone else's narrative. She walked through the stop in sequence. She did not editorialize either. She said what she had said, and what Sutter had said, and what she had done, and when. She said it in the tone she used on the floor when she was managing something difficult, clear, level, without affect, the voice that means, "I am not panicking. I know exactly what is happening. Pay attention." One of the board members asked her, "At any point during the stop, did you feel afraid?" She thought about it for a moment, genuinely thought about it. "Yes," she said, "not at first. At first, I was just tired. But when he asked me to walk to the front of the car and I told him about my knee, and he repeated the instruction anyway, yes, I was afraid, because I understood that my explaining myself was not going to change the outcome." The room was very quiet. "And I've thought about that a lot," she continued, "because that's not how it should work. Being able to explain yourself, being believed when you explain yourself, that should be something everyone gets, not something you have to be lucky enough to have a witness for." The board deliberated for 3 hours and 20 minutes. They found that Sutter's use of force report contained material inaccuracies. They found that the traffic stop lacked the probable cause required to conduct a vehicle search. They found that the cuffing was not justified by the circumstances on record. Sutter was suspended without pay pending a full departmental review. The resisting charge against Vivian was dropped in its entirety. The city agreed, in a separate proceeding 6 weeks later, to a settlement that Vivian used to establish a small legal defense fund for healthcare workers and veterans facing civil rights violations. She named it for her grandmother, who had also been a nurse, who had also known something about what it cost to keep showing up for people who didn't always show up for you. The departmental review took 4 months. At the end of it, 2 policy changes were implemented in Millbrook PD, a mandatory secondary review for all use-of-force reports filed within 72 hours of a civilian complaint, and a protocol requiring documentation of any gap in body camera footage exceeding 30 seconds. Yvonne called her when the policy changes went through. "It's not everything," Yvonne said. "No," Vivian agreed. "But it's something." She went to work the next morning. Third floor, trauma unit, 12-hour shift. She put on her scrubs and her stethoscope, and she walked through those doors the same way she had walked through them for 6 years, and she did her job, and she took care of people, and at the end of it she was hollowed out and grateful in equal measure, the way she always was. She sat in the parking garage for a few minutes before she started the car. She thought about the 47 seconds of missing footage, about how easy it would have been for all of it to disappear. Not dramatically, not with a villain's announcement, but quietly, procedurally, through forms and delays, and the weight of a system that knows how to make things complicated enough that people give up. She thought about Rashosha's truck on the shoulder, about a man who had almost driven home. She started the car. She drove home through Millbrook at a careful 40 miles an hour, hands at 10 and 2, every light green. Some nights, she still pressed her hand flat against her sternum in the parking garage, but it was getting easier to breathe.